What's up, guys? This is Bullby the Fell-Handed. Today we have Bull's KV-5 weak spot guide. Finally, if you have problems with KV-5s going forward, you should be fine with this weak spot guide. And to you KV-5 operators out there, this will let you know what the weak spots of the vehicle are and how to protect them best. Okay, let's get right to it. I will be using the Type 59 today. It has an armor piercing penetration value of 181 millimeters and the armor piercing composite rigid of 241 millimeters. So the premium rounds are going to be seriously punchy. First of all, before we do the frontal weak spots, big ups to Hybrid Zero for letting me shoot at him and be a big part of this weak spot guide. So kudos to you, my friend. So now the lower plate on this thing is nigh invincible, as I'm sure a great number of you know. The numbers on the lower plate are going to be quite high, even at this range and at this angle. Your effective armor is going to be around 200-ish. It's 180 degree, sloped at 33 degrees, so it's going to be quite tough. The upper plate is going to be in the 300s, unangled of course. This is just a straight on shot, incredibly thick armor, 180 millimeters, sloped at a good angle, so it almost doubles the effective armor. Now here is kind of the weak spot of this particular machine, is what is known as the R2-D2 turret. Effective armor on this bad boy is 140 millimeters. It has little to no armor. Now granted, of course, if you manage to wing around off the side, you have to be at a very steep angle firing at the R2-D2 turret here to not actually penetrate it. So just keep that in mind. Now this is the driver's hatch. If you hit it dead center, there's a good chance you're going to penetrate. The effective armor on this is 184 millimeters of thickness, effective thickness, mind you. If you hit it dead on, if you hit it to the left or the right, there's a very high chance you're going to bounce with, the gun that I am actually using. Granted, you use a stronger gun, you're going to have more luck. A weaker gun, you're going to have less luck. Now, the sides of the turret here are going to be up in the 300 millimeter range, simply because you've got 180 degrees of armor sloped at 57 degrees, so it nearly doubles the armor value. So you're going to be very tough. If somebody misses a round at range and it hits the side of the turret, there's a very high chance it's going to bounce. So right here you're going to see I'm going to try to take a shot at the side of the R2-D2 there just a moment ago. There's a good chance it'll bounce right there. Now, around the gun area, your armor here is going to be 180 millimeters of thickness, and your effective is only going to be around 182. There's not a whole lot of slope, so you can get through there even with standard rounds. Now, as we go to the mantlet here, your mantlets are typically very tough, and this is no exception. The top and bottom of the mantlet are in the 600s. There's so much spaced, and there's multiple layers of spaced armor. Now granted, of course, the cheeks and around the gun itself are considerably weaker. You could possibly get through those with 185, 190 millimeters of penetration. So in other words, if you get a high roll on your penetration, you're going to be in business. The top of the turret, the commander's hatch there, that's actually not the commander's hatch, that's the gunner's hatch, I apologize. The top of the gunner's hatch is going to be pretty much a free shot as well. Effective armor there, 150 millimeters of effective thickness. It has literally no slope if you hit it dead on. Now the other one, the commander's hatch itself, not so much. If you hit it dead on, you have a decent chance with this particular gun. It's more or less 50-50. 180 millimeters of effective thickness, considerably more if you miss. Right below that, there's a little crack of daylight I wouldn't necessarily recommend you aiming for it, but it is 150 millimeters. Okay, so moving on. Once you decide to load a PCR, it is a game changer, my friends. The lower plate opens up. You can go through that quite effectively, although you would literally need a Jagdpanzer to have any hope of getting through the upper plate. Your R2-D2 there on the left, as well as the other hatch here, everything opens up. Granted, the sides of the turret, though, like I said before, are in the 300s, so that's not really going to happen for you unless you roll really high, which, you know, is totally possible. The area around the turret, where we had a 50-50 shot before, is just nothing but cake. I mean, it's 100% going through it. You know, little to no chance of deflection. You know, the R2-D2, you can't even really pull a bounce off the very extreme side of it. So, you know, there's that. As well as there's a little bit of area at the top bottom of the mantlet, as well as around the gun. Very, very tricky spaced armor, which is something these Soviets are known for. If you don't believe me, watch my weak spot guide to the IS-7. Okay, so moving on. As you can see here, guys, the APCR is just going through this thing. I mean, pretty much any location, aside from, you know, the sides of the turret there in the upper plate, you're really going to be in business. So just kind of keep that in mind. You know, you KV-5 operators, in order to thwart this, I would engage at range, hold down. That way you're limiting what the bad guys can see. Okay, so let's go to some angled weak spots. Now, this tank, you can angle the mess out of it. You really, I mean, you can almost turn this thing sideways. 40 degrees is your optimum angle, if you can believe that. That is, you know, that is almost sideways. I mean, look at this thing. I mean, completely completely sideways, and this is the best angle for this thing. You know, a lot of tanks don't have a very, very high, you know, I would say margin for error. You know, normally you'll have, okay, 20 degrees is optimum angle, 25 degrees is over angled. This thing has 15 degrees that it, you know, in that comfort zone, I guess is what you're saying, you know, before it gets obviously over angled and everything pins it. Now, I'm not going to fire at the turret from this angle, obviously, because, you know, we're on board that, you know, the turret can be pinned from a certain point, and if you were shooting at the turret from this range, or this angle, excuse me, and the KV-5 was indeed looking 12 o'clock, you'd want to go for that flat spot right there behind the mantlet. The part that I said is incredibly strong, and the reason you want to go for that is because it's no longer angled, it is in fact flattened from this particular angle. So, a little bit of knowledge there for you. If you're good at math, you'll be good at this game. Let's go ahead and put it that way, because you can start running the numbers in your head once you know the thickness of the armor. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I know that may bore a lot of people, but anyway, yes, this thing angled at this particular degrees is a beast. Nothing's getting through the side. It's just not happening. You would actually be better off, you know, in a straight combat to angle up. That way, you know, it's possible you could protect the R2-D2 dome a little bit, make some micro movements. You never want to make it easy for the bad guys, folks, you know, to put rounds on you. You never want to give anybody free damage. You don't want to give anybody free kills. Now, the area I'm firing at right there just a moment ago is a little crack of daylight on the back end. You know, surprisingly, it comes in at 169 effective armor. It's only 140 with a little bit of slope. So just keep that in mind. If you're not getting any leeway with anything else, then that is the way to go. It's an easy pin in a difficult tank at this particular angle. This is so much like the IS-4. The thing just becomes beast-like when it's angled. Not so much, of course, when it's straight up. But, you know, this is something you need to think about. Now, granted, of course, we're running APCR. We're putting in a lot of work on the side of this particular vehicle. I mean, some are bouncing, some are getting through. So you kind of have to pick and choose your shots. You know, obviously, if you can go for the R2-D2 turret, but for those KV-5 operators, you want to make sure you're moving a lot, keeping your micro movements going, and that way you won't take as many penetrations, because, you know, even at this range, and you know, the Type 59 is no slouch for penetration, we're still bouncing a lot of premium ammunition. You know, we're not bouncing everything, but we're bouncing quite a bit. So keep that in mind. You know, you're not impenetrable, but at the same time, your armor is really, really strong for the tier. Now, granted, of course, you have tier 9s, 10 shooting at you. That is a whole different ball game. So just keep that in mind. You know, when you have the Leopard 1 medium tank with 268 millimeters of penetration, you're going to be in trouble no matter where that thing shoots you. So, you know, for what it is, tier for tier, this thing is pretty tough. That is my findings on this particular vehicle. Now, here in a moment, we're going to go ahead and do over-angled weak spots, and I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like when you angle this thing too much. Now, what I was speaking about earlier, your optimum angle, your primary angle for this thing, for the KV-5, is 40 degrees. Over-angled is 15. So, you know, for one thing, you can turn the thing almost sideways, and for another thing is when it's over-angled, then it becomes apparent that you're going to get pinned by everything. Now, if you look at this tank, it literally looks like it is completely sideways. That's when you start getting hit. That's when you start getting pinned, so on and so forth. We're going to see, you know, the lower plate, upper plate, invincible at this angle. You know, Jagdpanzer would bounce off you at this angle running a hot round. So, you know, keep that in mind. Once again, you know, possibly go for the angled part of the turret right there. If the gentleman is looking at his 12 o'clock, you know, of course, assuming you can't connect with the R2-D2 at the given range. Now, granted, we're 50 meters away. Yeah, we can hit it. If he's moving around, maybe not. If we've got other people shooting at us, maybe not. So you have to take all these things into consideration. As you can see here, guys, we're just going right down. Zozo says hi. We're going right down the side of the tank here, and we're just pumping rounds in this thing. It's not going to stop them. Nothing at this angle. Not even going to bother shooting APCR, because it's just going to be a wrap. And that's the thing. You have to know the capabilities of this tank. And you know, I always title this as Bull's Weak Spot Guide, but it's so much for operators as it is people who, you know, really want to take this tank down. It's for both sides of the fence, and that's why I'm putting this out here. You know, the guys who want to tighten up their KV-5 game, you know, this is for you, and the guys who want to tighten up their KV-5 takedown game, this is for you as well. So just keep that in mind. So yeah, as you can see here, guys, you know, once you get over angled, it's almost like taking direct side shots. So just keep that in mind. It's free damage essentially, so just don't over angle if you can absolutely help it. We're going to go ahead and do some side weak spots. I probably shouldn't do this. I should probably stop doing this, but you know what? I believe in being thorough, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do weak spot guides on the side of this tank as well as the rear, but this side, there's only so many areas you can shoot on the side that will go through. I mean, granted, it does have a few areas in the side that just you're not going to pin. The front of the mantlet, for example, that area right there, you know, once it's once it's turned, you know, once it's facing its 12 o'clock, you're not going to pin that thing. The Soviets were the first to actually figure out the whole sloped armor business with the T-34, and you know, the Germans quickly copied it. So, well, not super quickly, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is I'm not talking about history, I'm talking about this tank. I'm focusing on the things that I have a good idea that will bounce. And this is you know, when you see these things at the side, you know what you need to focus on. You know what you need to hit in order to put a hurting on this tank. Now, of course, for my operators out there, if you get caught in the side, you know, you pretty much have to assume you're going to be pinned because you're a slow tank. You're not a quick moving target. The best you can do, guys, for my KV-5 operators, if you're caught out in the open, is turn your turret towards the bad guys. That way, if the round deviates, manages to smack your turret, you're going to have that armor there. You know, this is a different story if you're fighting multiple guys. So as you see there, we bounced one off the mantlet. That's to be expected, but as far as the rest of it, it's pretty much a free-for-all. They are going to go through. There's little to nothing you can do about it, so just keep that in mind. I'm just putting this in here to be thorough. There's a few areas that, you know, you're gonna bounce, but for the most part, you're gonna get pinned, and there's little to nothing you can do about it. Normally, this kind of comes, you know, when the KV-5 operators make a bad call, end up turning their tank sideways, or for example, when they're getting rolled, and there's not a lot you can do about it. But as you see there, 181 millimeters of penetration bounced right off the side of the turret. So, you know, it just depends on RNG. You may get a bad roll. So it happens. It happens to all of us. So just keep that in mind. Okay, we're going to do rear weak spot, guys. Once again, this is a little, I don't know. I probably shouldn't be doing this. It's a little too thorough. But you know what? We're going to do it anyway. It wouldn't be Bull's weak spot guide if we didn't explore every single weak spot. So right here, this band is actually going to bounce at 181 millimeters of effective penetration. So just keep that in mind. There's areas in this vehicle, in this tank, that are going to more or less auto bounce, unless, you know, you're running a hot round or you're in a tier 10 tank destroyer. KV-5 is a very, very tough tank. Now, as you can see here, your premium round, your APCR, is in fact going right through this. So, you know, you just have to keep that in mind. You know, when you see the rear of these tanks, you see the side of them, it's not a guaranteed penetration. You're not going to get a guaranteed penetration against the KV-5. You have to work for it. You have to work for every single penetration you get on this bad boy. If you hit the sides of the turret, it's going to bounce. There's nothing you can do for it. You just need to be ready for it. You know, you need to focus on, obviously, the flattest part of the armor facing you. So just keep that in mind. And KV-5 operators, if there's somebody behind you, wiggle your turret like crazy. Don't give them a free shot. As you can see here, we're bouncing off the side. It's kind of under the turret on the side a little. We're bouncing. The premium rounds, however, are not bouncing at all. So, you know, I'm not saying you necessarily have to go to premium rounds if you're shooting a KV-5 in the back. However, your aim just needs to be steady. I don't ever recommend auto-locking these things. Granted, I know I preach auto-lock when it's more defensive versus offensive. In other words, if you just want to peek out and take a quick shot. But in this case, if this KV-5 is a one-shot, you need to aim that thing in and you need to shut him down. Because you don't want to leave a vehicle like this left alone to roam the battlefield even for a moment, because, you know, if you can get that armor at range, you know, it's going to be hard to hit those weak spots. It's going to be hard to hit the R2-D2. It's going to be, you know, hard to hit the other areas. So just keep that in mind. You know, granted, I know a lot of people would say this is a brawling tank, and it is, but at the same time, if you engage at range, I think that is the answer. I think that would be overall, you know, make your game a little bit better, just simply because the weak spots are going to be so hard to hit. Okay, guys, let's get right into modules. You know, I'm very particular how I put the modules down, and I like to go over every single thing out there, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So, first of all, we're going to start with the front of the vehicle. If you look right here is the cannon. I don't know why I do that. This thing has a lot of observation devices. They're all over the place, and you would expect that when you have a giant tank, and that's kind of what we have going on here. We have observation devices all over this bad boy. So yeah, there's that. I don't know why I did that. Moving on. This is your radio operator. He sits right where the R2-D2 dome is. Poor guy, because that's where everybody shoots. Your driver is going to sit in the smaller, more well-armored one. Now, moving on, the commander is going to sit in the top left-hand side of the vehicle, kind of at the smaller turret. The one I mentioned earlier, the one's a little tougher to pin because if you miss just in the slightest, it's not going to happen for you. So that one's the commander right there, and he's not easy to get to, believe it or not. To his left, if you are inside the vehicle, is the gunner. He sits in the slightly larger one. It's a little bit easier to pin. Now let's go sideways here. This is going to be your driver right through here. Moving on, your gunner is going to be in the pretty much exact place he was when he was in the front, right through there. I kind of put it at a slope because I imagine all my tank cruisers leaning back as they drive. Moving on, the loader sits directly behind the gunner, right there, and directly to the loader's 6, he has an ammo rack. That whole little square right there, it's more like a rectangle. That whole rectangle is just full of burrets. Okay, so moving on, this side of the tank is pretty much made of ammo racks. Unfortunately, here on the bottom, as low as you can go, is ammo racks, and they are stored on the floor of the tank. Essentially, that's obviously not the ones that are ready and prepped and inside the turret. Now we do have a fuel tank here, and this is a very, very large fuel tank, and it is nestled right back here next to the engine. The engine and the fuel tank are obviously one, and they are both at the rear of the tank, as an engine should be. Granted, of course, we are, a little different than the Germans who get the powertrain hit from the front. Everything regarding the engine is in the back of this tank. Okay, guys, so the ammo rack is going to follow the line of the hole right here. This is the ammo in a ready position to be used by the loader. The rest of it, of course, he would have to hike up from the bottom of the hole there that I showed you on the side. This is the engine. The engine is a very odd shape, simply because it's kind of like an upside down fat T in this location. That is what the information I have says. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching Bull's Weak Spot Guide to the KV-5. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I have a little a pre-outro here that I'm going to run for the next few weeks, and it kind of says what else I am working on. That being said, the next weak spot guide will be the VK100, so make sure to look out for that. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey guys, don't forget, we have Interview with a Tanker. Deadline for that is February 1st. Just comment your gamer tag. We've already got about 35 or so names for that, but I would like more. Q&A, I'm going to set the deadline for that for February 1st as well, so just put Q&A in front of your comment, or excuse me, your question in the comment section. We'll get you taken care of there. The 1000th sub video is going to have 5 giveaways of premium time. More details when it happens. It should be soon. I mean, hopefully. Weak spot guides are coming, I promise. Up next is going to be the KV-5, followed by the VK100, and then finally the Panzer 7. Hopefully I can get on top of my weak spot guide game.